Well, Steve Hamilton is here with us now on Shout Radio. Good afternoon. Welcome along.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, Steve Hamilton is a former prosecutor and criminologist, and his new novel, A Scandal of the Particular, presents the unusual scenes behind the lawyers and judges and takes readers inside the arresting forces of the criminal justice system. So, without giving too much away, really, and spoiling anything, just kind of take it from there in more detail.
Well, A Scandal of the Particular really is my novel that asks readers to consider the victim's journey in the context of those that provide help. What is happening in the life of the lawyer arguing the case before the court or for them. One of the cases within the case or within the book is a story about two Indigenous women. The protagonist, Hyman Kazan, is assigned the case of Trinity Rivers Residential School, where two young Indigenous women were raped by staff. And the problem is that they're constantly being told by both lawyers and judges and psychologists that it's not their fault. And I've done that myself in my career as Crown Counsel. I've told victims many times it's not their fault. But the problem with that is that once the problem doesn't lie with you, you can't fix it on your own if it lies outside of you. And when it lies outside of you, you have to rely on other people to help you to find a solution. In this case, justice is being sought in terms of that case, in terms of a system. In my book, it's a corrupt system in so much as the individuals are all flawed. The judge is involved in a relationship with the protagonist's girlfriend, and he's trying this very case before him. So it creates a dynamic of how do you find justice when you're in a flawed situation with flawed individuals.
Yeah. And how did you come up with the idea for the book? I take it was inspired by your own career and things that you saw.
Yeah, very much. I worked as a criminal lawyer for over 30 years, and throughout that time I listened, I saw, and was involved in many situations that led to the creation of the book. And I realized, as many of us do, that everyone has a story. Everyone has pain. And I dealt with countless victims of crimes and lawyers over that period of time. And one thing in the back of the book, in the acknowledgements, is a list of some lawyers who died, either sickness brought on by the cases that they did or suicide. And this is a tribute also to them, a statement that you're remembered.
Yeah. And the actual title of the book, A Scandal of the Particular, is interesting because I don't really know what it means. Do you know what it means?
Well, I can tell you what I believe it to mean. It really means, maybe the easiest way to me to go about it is to read from my own book, if I can indulge you in terms of how I wrote about it.
Yeah.
And this is the protagonist, and he's thinking about his own life and the practice of law. And he says the following: he has reached a point in his life where he's become to the realization that one's identity comes from within, rather than being dependent on what one owns or what one achieves. The opinions of others does not define him. In coming to this revelation, he holds steadfast to the belief that everyone is divine or worthy of respect. That is, if you start out with the concrete or the particular, then and only then can you find the elusive doorway to the universal. That's my definition of the scandal of the particular.
Yeah. And I like the way it's written on the cover as well, because scandal and particular are in caps, but of the isn't.
Yeah, well, I think that you picked up on it too. That in terms of cases, we always used to speak that you see it. You've heard it said many different ways, I'm sure. The devil is in the details.
Yeah,
it's in the particular. It's in those little concrete pieces of evidence that turns the case, and that's also in how we look at things sometimes in terms of life or issues or that. So that's sort of a subtext within the book.
Yeah. And I don't know how much you were involved in the cover, but the actual picture is kind of cool because it's got a picture of a person, but it's a sort of ghost effect there. You can see through them.
Yeah, well, that's And beyond that is the landscape of Vancouver where the book is written.
Ah.
So you can see the lights and the shoreline, and on the back of the book, I don't know if you've got that handy, maybe you don't, but it shows the lights off in the distance. And so yeah, that's something that you picked up on. Thanks for doing that. That's fantastic that you would point that out.
Yeah, well, I'm just kind of interested in that kind of stuff because I'm just trying to think how they took the picture. I guess they would have had to take one without the person and one with the person, and you kind of merge it, because that's how they always did ghosts in old movies, isn't it?
Right. And the goal of the book is to put you in the position of the person.
Yeah.
So, what would you do? How would you face this situation? What would you think about? What would you do? That's what I attempt to do in terms of the book, even right from its cover.
So how would you say the book increases the knowledge of the reader?
Well, it's interesting that you would ask me that, because one of the interesting responses that I've had from the book, and I was surprised by, was that those that wanted to shape a book already written. And let me just explain what I mean by that. After writing the book, I got contacted by various judges and lawyers, and the book was already completed, but they contacted me with what they would say would be words of wisdoms, like, make me look nice.
Yeah.
Am I empathetic? Am I honest? The curious thing about the whole process of writing fiction caused lawyers and judges and maybe other people to engage in this process of self-examination. For example, you're not really talking about me, are you? Or that sounds like somebody I know.
Yeah.
One of my favorite authors, and I don't know if you've read very much Hemingway, but Hemingway would say, and I'll quote him, he said that a writer's function is to reveal reality. And I hope that I did that in an honest fashion in this book.
Yeah, definitely. So how did you first realize that you wanted to be a writer?
Well, I guess it was during the pandemic. I wanted a way to deal with the restrictions placed on all of us. And so I was no longer able to live outside of myself, so I decided to look within.
Yeah.
And that started the writing process. I've always enjoyed writing. I always thought it was a way to engage people. And as a criminal lawyer and as a Crown Counsel, I did many jury trials, and I always thought the most important thing was to cause people to ponder or put themselves in a particular situation, to tell a story, to provide a narrative about a crime or an offender, and to engage them. And so that's what I wanted to do with the writing process.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I wasn't really expecting you to say that you only really started writing last year. So you've had a long career of other things before settling on this.
Yes. It's interesting. A lot of people, maybe yourself, think, one day I'm going to write a book.
Yeah.
And you've got other things that you've got to do, of course, and that occupies your time. But when, in particular here in Canada, when things came to an abrupt halt, it gave you the time to sit and to contemplate and to do other things. And so that's what I decided to do.
Yeah. And have you written any other books, or have you only really had the time to do this one so far?
No, I wrote a book of poetry called Pictures from a Yard Sale. And anyway, I've done that, but this is my first novel.
Yeah. And in terms of future books, do you think they're going to be a similar theme about criminology and stuff, or would you perhaps branch out?
Well, I've had some folks want me to write a prequel in terms of this particular book, and I've kind of entertained that. But I'm currently working on my second book, or my second novel. It's called Appalachia: A Forgotten Harvest, and it's sort of the story of a part of America that's forgotten. Hopefully not by you or me, but it's the story of Colwood, West Virginia, and the people who are there who believe in themselves and trust in God, but despite the fall of the coal industry and the rise of the opiate crisis. So that's sort of my next project.
Yeah. And I suppose in your childhood, were you a bit of a creative person maybe, and perhaps a storyteller? Like, in other words, this isn't really a new thing.
And looking back, I guess I was drawn to the stage, whether it was athletics or the theater. I love the stage and the creative process. I, in fact, had an uncle who practiced criminal law in Montreal, and he encouraged me to seek reason and to argue cases or issues that I believed in.
Yeah.
But the most determinant factor for me was I grew up in a rough public school. I used to joke it was the only school newspaper that had an obituary section because it was pretty rough. And I looked around and I saw my colleagues and I thought, damn, you're going to need a criminal lawyer, my friend. Whether they were involved in assaultive behavior or drugs or thefts or whatever, I thought, well, I might as well be the guy that will help you out. And so that's what got me into the world of law.
Yeah. And being in law, I guess you do come across a lot of horrific stuff, especially being a prosecutor. I suppose you will hear about crimes that are particularly gruesome. So how does that affect you?
Well, that's a good question. I think over the years you push it down.
Yeah.
You're constantly pushing it down so that you deal with it. Can you imagine that, you go into work, you go into your particular office that day, and the first person you see says this to you. Well, Steve, I'm going to tell you about the most horrible thing that ever happened to me in my life.
Wow.
And you say, go into a bit more detail on that. And then maybe 11 o'clock, the next person comes in and they're telling you, Steve, I want to tell you about the most horrible thing that ever happened to you. And you have a whole day of that.
Wow.
And that piles up. The other interesting aspect of it, Toby, is that psychologists and those that help individuals, victims, often say, you know what, you need to get beyond this. You need to be able to fragment your life and not think about it. Whereas as a lawyer, you want the details. So I would say, I want you to go in the most minute detail you can to describe what happened to you. One case that stood out, and I won't go on too long, but was a fellow who was riding his motorcycle with his girlfriend on the back, and she was hit by an impaired driver and split in half in the back.
Whoa.
And he was overly traumatized.
Yeah.
And I had to ask him to go over what happened in minute detail again and again to prepare him for trial.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's that's something that affects many of my colleagues in different ways.
Yeah. And I guess because you're a writer now, that does tend to be something that's quite cathartic. I guess normally when you're writing biographical stuff, but do you sometimes use real life things that have affected you in your job in your writing?
Yes, within the often people have commented about this particular book being a nonfiction book written in a fiction manner or a fictitious manner. So I've drawn upon, of course, particular individuals or cases that I've known throughout my career to illustrate those stories.
Yeah. So what other books have you got coming up then after this one?
Like I say, I'm working on Appalachia now when I get a chance. That's going to be my primary focus, and trying to understand that region of the world and what's happened there. Yeah. And to talk about the many issues that people try to rise above.
Yeah.
Right now, people are all over, I think, at least North America, probably where you are too, are questioning what is justice. They're faced with that issue. And also, I'm trying to draw attention in this particular book about the person at the end of the 911 call, the ambulance driver, the doctor, the person that provides the care. What are they going through while they're going through what you're asking them to help you deal with?
Yeah, absolutely. And here we go. What kind of advice would you give to anyone listening at the moment who's maybe thinking of writing?
Well, I think it's really simplistic advice. Like I said, 80%, I think it was 80% that I saw want to write a book, in their life.
Yeah.
And I would just encourage them, take the first step, make some notes, write a journal.
Yeah.
When I was practicing full time as a criminal lawyer, people would say to me, "What are you going to do after this?" And I would say the same thing. Your life has many chapters. Why not write a few of them down?
Yeah, absolutely.
It'd be interesting to hear your story, and I'd encourage you to make a few notes. And everyone has a story. Everyone has gone through something that we could all benefit from learning about.
Yeah. What are you up to for Christmas?
Massive consumptions of alcohol. And I just agreed yesterday to go to the London Book Fair in April. So I'm looking forward to coming over where you are and enjoying the better part of the world. So I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely. Well, where are we able to check out the latest book, A Scandal of the Particular?
Thank you very much. Well, you can go to my website, which is www.stevehamiltonbooks.com, and it will take you to links where you can purchase the book. It's available at Amazon, it's for Barnes & Noble, Weatherstones, the Book Depository, but all those links are there so you don't have to look it up.
Great. Well, thanks very much for coming on the show this afternoon. It's been great talking to you.
Well, it's fantastic to have a chance to talk to you. I've looked forward to it, and you exceeded my expectations. You've been a wonderful interviewer, a great person to talk to, and I look forward to talking to you again soon, I hope.